Hi, I'm here with Associate Professor Jim Helfield from Western's renowned Huxley College of the Environment. We're going to talk a little bit today about the removal of 2 dams on the Elwha River in Western's Olympic Peninsula. But before we get an opportunity to learn a little bit more about it, Western students have put together a beautiful video about the beginnings of the process before those dams were removed.
The tribes always knew that they need to take care of the environment and the surrounding areas for the purpose of just basic survival. They knew if they couldn't take care of the environment around them that they weren't going to live for very long. So they had to take care of it out of the will to survive.
What has historically happened because of the dams in the Elwha and where they were located is they cut off 90% of the habitat for salmon to use.
The sockeye and the chinook, every year they go up to the lower dam and they will literally beat their heads against the dam trying to find their way back up, which is, I think that's really fascinating because, you know, that dam has been in place for almost 100 years, yet these fish know that they want to go up into the watershed. Their instinct is to migrate up past the lower river and up into the watershed. So every year you have a population where you can just see them circling in the pool behind the dam, just waiting to try to get up. One other thing that's unique about the Northwest Forest and the salmon is that because the salmon live for several years in the ocean, when they migrate up, they're actually bringing ocean nutrients back up into the watershed. And as they swim up, spawn, and then die, as their bodies decompose or are being eaten by bugs or other species, it provides a natural fertilizer to our forest. So we actually have healthier forests because of the salmon.
In a dynamic river system like the Elwha, it's moving water, it's moving sediment, it's moving energy, it's moving nutrients from the upstream to the downstream. So you've changed that entire process. So what happened in the lower river is that all these gravels that historically were recruited to the lower river no longer were recruited, and it's basically decreased the estuary that used to be there by a significant amount. And that's a really critical area where salmon will actually equilibrate from basically being a freshwater fish to a saltwater fish. What we'll see happen when the dam is removed is we'll see that estuary expand.
By putting in a dam, you remove all of these processes that slowly act over time and you may not notice, but suddenly after 100 years you have a very different system below the dam than what you had before. And so by taking out the dams, you allow all of these processes, you allow the hydrology to restore, you allow the transport of sediments and nutrients and woods to really come back. Even during the 1920s and 1912, when the dam was built, tribal members and the elders said it's going to destroy our fish runs, it's going to kill them off, and they voiced their opinion, but there was nobody during that time in 1912. In 1912, they weren't even considered a U.S. citizen. So there was nobody to voice their opinion to, nobody to go to make a complaint or lodge a concern.
You see a cultural shift in how people view rivers and fish and dams. It's not that dams are bad. Some dams are definitely necessary and they provide clean power, but we have lots of dams in places that probably are going to be looked at and re-examined, and the Elwha is going to be the first one of those.
You don't need to teach an ecosystem what to do. We just really need to give it the opportunity to do what it has done for millions of years. So we sometimes interject ourselves in these natural processes, and we are part of the natural process. But the reality of this situation is that once you remove those barriers, the river knows what to do, the fish really know what to do, and it's really us observing and being good stewards, you know, with our keen observational skills and our ability to measure things to really understand what a river can do by itself.
So the Elwha Dam, I mean, this has been a long process.
This has been a very long process. I think the dam removal was originally approved by Congress in 1992, and so it's been over 20 years in the making.
And how long have you been working on it?
I've been working off and on various projects associated with the dam removals since about 2005.
Okay. And what kind of research are you doing on the dam?
The research that I've done has focused mostly on the recovery of the vegetation surrounding the dams. Now that those dams have been removed, you've got the former reservoirs, Lake Mills and Lake Aldwell, that have been drained of water. All that exposed sediment is going to be colonized by vegetation. And so for some time the park has been concerned to make sure that we can get a diverse, healthy community of plants and that it won't be completely taken over by invasive species.
Blackberries.
Yeah, exactly. It won't just be a field of blackberries and Scotch broom. So the research I've done, I worked with a graduate student a few years ago. We actually collected some sediment from the bottom of Lake Mills and conducted some studies in greenhouses to see what, if anything, can grow on that. And so the work that we did helped to inform the park's revegetation plan.
So tell me a little bit about the sediment itself. I mean, is it rocky? I mean, it's kind of, to me, it's so interesting. I mean, I always look at a lake and I always wonder, okay, what's the bottom of a drained lake look like? You know?
Well, when you have a dam, the most obvious thing that it does is it stops the flow of water. But when you stop the flow of water and you turn a river into a big lake, what that does is it allows a lot of fine sediment to settle out of the water and settle on the bottom. And so as a result, after 100 years of having that dam in place, the bottoms of especially Lake Mills is full of extremely fine sediment. We dug this stuff up and it's silt. It's got a diameter of about 15 microns, which is very wee. And it's essentially got two textures. When it's wet, it's like porridge, and when it's dry, it's like concrete. So it's a very tough growth medium. There are some plants that don't do well on it, but there are some plants that can survive on it, that can colonize. And actually, after 2 years, the revegetation work has been going on, and it's starting to green up. It's starting to look pretty good.
That's neat. Mm-hmm. So one of the real benefits, of course, to Western, and one of Western's real strengths, is that we get professors like you who get to work with students as undergrads who get to do research. Our undergrads get an opportunity to do research that so many other schools don't get that opportunity to do. Yeah. And so when you're working with students, how have you used our students over these years? I mean, you've been doing this for 8 years, I think.
Yeah, now, about that, yeah. Well, the project I talked about earlier, that was with a graduate student, and so we involve our graduate students quite a bit also. But as you said, we do have a lot of undergrads working. For several years, Huxley had a grant from the National Science Foundation, research undergraduate education grant, and that funded a lot of small-scale projects. What we like to do is when we have a large-scale project like this, we like to find little sort of bite-sized pieces of it that we can apportion out to different undergraduates and graduate students. And so our students, as well as the students from Huxley's program on the peninsulas, have been doing some really interesting work looking at effects on is the vegetation removal, bird communities. We've also had some students doing some interesting work looking at the importance of all those nutrients in the salmon carcasses coming upstream. In the video, we heard them talk about that, how the salmon come up from the ocean, they bring all those nutrients in their bodies, and then when they die, all those nutrients help feed the ecosystem. And so we had a student a few years ago from the Peninsulas program.
Dissecting fish.
She was actually taking core samples from trees to see the extent to which some of these nutrients might actually be helping to foster tree growth alongside the stream. So it's all connected.
Wow. So what's the benefit of having the students come on out there? I mean, it seems like kind of an obvious question, right? I mean, it's going to benefit them, but...
Well, it's what we're here for. You know, our mission at Huxley College is to teach courses and conduct research in the field of environmental science. That's our mission. That's what we're here to do. And I can stand in a classroom and I can talk about something all day, and I can show pictures of it, but it's not the same thing as getting out there and seeing it and actually working with the equipment and getting your feet wet and being out in the field.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, you know, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, actually seeing it
Standing
in person
there.
is worth 1,000 pictures. Yeah.
That's true. So the Elwha Dam, you and I, when we were talking earlier, you had mentioned that it's the largest dam that's been breached in the United States. Is that right? Or?
This is the largest dam removal project ever undertaken, definitely in the States, probably in the world. It's the largest one that there have been quite a few dam removals in the States, but they've been mostly much, much smaller than this. So this is, you know, the Elwha Dam was about 100 feet tall, and the Glines Canyon Dam was 210 feet tall. So this is a lot of dam being removed.
So there's a lot of people on it. You're on it. Are there any other faculty here at Western?
Yep. My colleague John McLaughlin has been doing a lot of work there, looking at the effects of dam removal on bird communities, and he's also been doing some interesting work looking at how bird communities might help facilitate some of the revegetation work.
Sure.
I have some other colleagues with NOAA down in Seattle that have been doing a lot of really top-notch work on the fish recovery, the recovery of the fish populations.
Speaking of the fish, so I had heard that once they breached, fish actually started they started working their way out. They started spawning like it had never been there.
Yeah, you know, in the field of ecological restoration, we like to say if you build it, they will come. In dam removal, it's the opposite. If you tear it down, they will come. And there's been some concern. We didn't know how quickly the recovery would take place or how quickly the recolonization would take place, but especially with all that sediment coursing through. But we've already seen a few wild Chinook and steelhead make their way up past the first dam, past the lower dam, and spawn in the Lillian River. So,
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, it is really a pleasure to meet you. Thank you so
Thanks,
much
Rick.
for coming
It's
into the
been my
studio.
pleasure.
One of Western's fantastic professors, very popular professor, and also an outstanding researcher, Associate Professor Jim Helfield in Western's Huxley College of the Environment.
Thanks.
They're picked, and then we press them into juice. We take that juice and we ferment it.
You combine sugars with yeast and water. Specifically for apple cider, I suppose. The sugars within the apple cider will be essentially